Here's a limerick that I hope will stick. Sing it to all those motherfuckers like to suck your dick.
Officer friendly, gonna kill your motherfucking ass dead. A taser, a boot, a bullet to your motherfucking head. The gang all joins in. A murder but no goddamn sin. Believe your eyes or what you are fed. With me now, officer friendly, gonna kill your motherfucking ass dead. A taser, a boot, a bullet to your motherfucking head. The gang all joins in. A murder but no goddamn sin. Believe your eyes or what you are fed.
Eat, fuck, kill.
Eat, fuck, kill. Eat, fuck, kill. Good day. I'm glad that you're here. And thanks for stopping by. This is episode 2 of the Eat, Fuck, Kill podcast. And I am the host of Eat, Fuck, Kill, Masavana Satori Wabi-Sabi. I wanted to take a few moments here at the beginning of episode 2 to explain a little bit about how episode 1 came to be, or really how this podcast came to be at all. Episode 1 was recorded in late May, early June of 2020, shortly after the murder of George Floyd. Something about that George Floyd murder really brought it to a head for me. I thought there were a couple of police murders in this country that I thought you can't get worse than that. I couldn't get angrier than I was. And some of those would include the John Crawford murder inside the Walmart in Beaver Creek, Ohio. The Kelly Thomas murder by the Fullerton Police Department in California. The Walter Scott murder. Sandra Bland. And I needed a release. For my frustration. Not only with the police state, but it's the fact that it's been allowed to continue this long. I would have never believed that Americans would stand by and watch their neighbors be murdered in the streets and not do a thing, or not do enough to change it. And it's been going on for so long, too long. And the state would have you believe that every one of these unarmed people that are murdered by the police, that they got what was coming to them. And there was no other way to manage that situation than to just kill them. And it's one of we talked about this in episode 1, but the grand juries that district attorneys and prosecutors use to excuse police officers of their murders. So after the George Floyd murder, and I decided I needed an outlet. So that's when I sat down to record episode 1. Now, you don't know this, but episode 1, when I was done recording it, was more than 3.5 hours long. And that couldn't be, so I ultimately edited it down to about 1 hour and 25 minutes, 1 hour and 30. But obviously, in the course of doing so, I cut out a lot of stuff that would have helped episode 1 with its continuity. Talked a great deal about the church in episode 1, with the idea being that I was going to show a timeline of their involvement in slavery and oppression from the arrival of Columbus to today. And enough of that got edited out towards the end that the today part was left less than fully clear. And I'll touch on that in the future. So after I recorded it, I was curious how long it would take me to turn 3.5 hours of footage of the original recording of the podcast into something that's useful, in terms of converting it, getting it uploaded and editing it and adding graphics and whatnot. And it was an opportunity for me to kind of learn whether this was something I wanted to do and whether this was something I had the time to do well. And since that recording in June of 2020, we're now in the middle of January 2021. It took me an extended period of time to kind of rearrange my life in such a way where this podcast, where I could kind of open up the time to do it as regularly as I wanted to, and as well as I wanted to, and kind of have the time to invest in the editing and the graphics. Now, in episode one of the things I learned is that the editing and adding the graphics and whatnot can take a lot of time. But I've also kind of used this time between then and now to get a little better at that, and to I'm more proficient at that, because I wanted to get into kind of better, higher quality of graphics for this. I'm at a place now where for 2021, Eat Fuck Kill is going to now be at least once every 10 days, maybe once a week. I'll be putting out a podcast of Eat Fuck Kill in 2021. That's my mission. It's also important, I wanted to point out that while episode number 1, the portion between the commas was a lot, it talked a lot about justice and the police, and it touched on a lot of historical aspects of that. That's not all we're going to talk about, not even close. And the range of topics that we're going to cover here at Eat Fuck Kill is going to extend well beyond those things, politics, and certainly well beyond those things, the police state. And I thought what I would do to give you an idea of what is ahead in 2021 here at Eat Fuck Kill is that I might share with you a few of the topics that I intend to cover in 2021. I'd like to do a podcast in 2021 that covers what I'm going to call information, propaganda, the media, cognitive dissonance, and we're going to wrap all of those topics around one man and his influence on those things and many others, and that's Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud. Now, absolutely, positively, and unequivocally, and very soon, I'm thinking as soon as the next episode 3, to kind of completely shift gears. One of the topics that I'd like to cover in episode 3, hopefully, but very soon either way, is going to be an episode that covers backpacking and hiking. Now, backpacking, getting into the woods and staying there, is my by far favorite pastime. Frankly, it's my favorite thing, pretty much. Period. And but there's 86 million podcasts or videos out there on the internet covering your gear and all the basics of backpacking and hiking. So I'm going to do it a little differently. My preference when I go into the wilderness is to stay there for long stretches of time. Generally, my preference, about every 2 weeks, I'll pop out for a day, shower, laundry, pick up some food, back into the wilderness. So what I'd like to talk about in my backpacking and hiking podcast, we are, of course, going to cover some of the gear and planning, diet and food choices. But I'd like to get a little deeper into it and have some kind of interesting things to talk about that maybe you haven't seen before or heard before regarding the topic of backpacking and hiking. And to give you some background on me as a backpacker and hiker, like I said earlier, it's my favorite thing in the world to do. And it doesn't, when I say backpacking and hiking, I mean being in the woods. You don't necessarily have to be moving every day, although it's much my preference, but being in the woods, generally the wilderness. I'm not talking about your local city park. I'm talking about true wilderness, where you're very unlikely to see another person. So one of the real important points to me that I want to talk about is long distance backpacking, traveling, say, by foot, with everything you need to survive outside of, food resupplies on your back. for more than, we'll say, 1,000 miles. And that's what we'll consider long distance backpacking. Those trips covering 1,000 miles or more. And within that framework of these long distance trips, some of the things I'd like to talk about is that when you hear 1,000 mile trip by foot in the wilderness, lugging all this stuff on your back, it's easy to come to the conclusion, oh, gee, you're out of your mind. That does not sound like fun. It's going to rain and this and that. And you're going to have to cross rivers and up and down over mountains. And where do you sleep? And it's easy to find or hear in that 1,000 things that can make it sound unappealing. And what I'd like to do is tell you from my experiences all the things that make it wonderful and appealing that maybe you hadn't thought of or considered, including some of the surprising benefits that you receive from a long distance hiking trip. As a teaser, I'll give you a little taste of what I mean so you get the idea. If you're backpacking in the wilderness for 1,000 miles, where say, you're kind of functioning like a machine. You get up in the morning, pick up your tent and what have you, pack it all up, and you start walking, and you walk all day, except for the times where you take a break or maybe see something beautiful you want to stop and kind of appreciate for a moment. Hike all day, and then set up camp and repeat, where you're in motion. When you're doing that day after day after day for say 1,000 miles, and you're not in a town, the nature of how you consume fluids changes. When you're home, it's easy to grab, soda, or, when you're at the store, or pull one out of the fridge, or, drink coffee all the time because you're near a convenience store or a coffee pot constantly. But when you're in the woods and there isn't a convenience store every mile, and the only real liquids at your disposal, with any regularity anyway, is water. And it's water that you are pulling out of springs and streams along your hike. So because of that, you're drinking almost all water, spring water from the mountains, day after day after day. And when you walk for 1,000 miles, that's going to take you a while. Let me show you. Even at say 20 miles a day, it's going to take you a bit of time to walk 1,000 miles. So day after day after day, as a natural part of your day in your life, you're exercising all day because you're going up and down mountains, or at least walking long distances on these trails with 25 to 40 pounds strapped to the core of yourself, strapped to the core of your body. So a certain level of physical fitness takes over whether you want it to or not. And while this is true, while you're getting this exercise and you're sweating every day, at the same exact time, you're drinking nothing but water, and a lot of it. And it's one of the, right there, two of the best things you can do for your body and your health. Drink tons and tons of water, and the fresher the water, the better. And exercise. And you get both of those as a natural course of long stays in the wilderness. And it doesn't show up immediately, but over the course of the 1,000 miles, by the time you're done it, without ever having really noticed it along the way, when you're done, you'll realize how much better you feel, how much better you look, and how it just kind of happened pinprick by pinprick, day after day after day. And you blink, open your eyes, and suddenly you're very strong and very fit just from taking a walk in the woods. And so that's definitely, and don't underestimate the magnitude of the drinking nothing but mountain spring water day after day after day for an extended period of time, what its role in the fitness that you feel at the end. It's not just the exercise. Drinking water, and almost solely water, makes an enormous difference. And those two things together, the constant exercise coupled with drinking so much water, fresh water, and only water, generally speaking, those two things coupled together really add something to your well-being. And then when, there's all these other factors that you kind of add on top of those two, the kind of joy that you find in the small, quiet interactions in nature. And some of the bigger, not so quiet interactions that you can have with nature, depending on where you are. So I definitely want to spend an upcoming and very soon episode talking about backpacking and hiking. Uh, and we'll throw in some of the kind of universal stuff in there. I'll throw in a couple secrets about fire making, and I'll tell you two of the things. What I'll do is I'll tell you about some of the items that we all have laying around our house that are tremendous for fire starting. A couple of quick hiking things that I'll share with you here. First is the Rogue River Trail. It runs from Agnes, Oregon to near Grants Pass, Oregon. Again, it runs from Agnes, Oregon, and Agnes, I believe, is Agness, and it runs to near Grants Pass, Oregon, the Rogue River Trail. And in the spring, it is a remarkable hike. Now, it's essentially in a rainforest, so you're going to get rained on all the time while you're hiking this trail, particularly in the spring, which is when, with all the rain, when I would recommend you do it, because as everything kind of scurries to life in the spring, the river is filled with fish, and the bears are all over the place going down to the river and feeding right near the river, and the eagles and the osprey are just dive bombing the river, and there's just a lot of beautiful, neat things going on. When the osprey dive bomb for the fish, they're pretty efficient with it, the fishing part of it. But when they fly off with the fish, a lot of times that's the area where osprey aren't quite as careful. And what the eagles do is they kind of hang out around the osprey. And when the osprey are flying off with their fish, they tend to drop them pretty frequently. They'll drop the fish in midair as they're flying away with their meal. And the eagles will kind of be hovering around, either flying underneath them or waiting. And there's always an eagle waiting under an osprey. And the minute they'll drop their fish, the eagles will fly in and hover underneath them and snag the fish out of midair as it's falling back down towards the water. And of course, because of this, fish land all over the place. They get dropped by the osprey. And as a result of that, the bears come and they hang out on both sides of the river and wait for the osprey to drop their fish into the woods. And the bears feed off that as well. So it's in the springtime, the Rogue River Trail is just a remarkable place to kind of watch all this play out. The bears and the fish and the birds and the osprey and the eagles. And it's a beautiful walk. It's a wonderful walk. And you're always right there along the river, and it's just pretty fantastic hike. So those of you who are looking for a new place to kind of experience a terrific hike, and it's not a long one, it's, I want to say, less than 40 miles, the Rogue River Trail from Agnes to Grants Pass, maybe 33 if I recall, but it's terrific, 33 miles. So take your time, let it last 5-6 days, and just slowly amble and watch. And of course, you're going to get wet and stay wet. That's just part of it there. Some of the other things that I want to do an episode on organic, and for that matter, non-organic gardening. And I'm going to use my personal garden coming this spring. So this one you can expect probably in March or April. But I'll kind of walk you through the entire spring through my garden as it sprouts. I'll show you what I'm planting, what I'm doing, how it works. We'll talk about soil conditions and what makes for organic versus not organic. And we'll show you the whole life cycle of some interesting fruits and vegetables that I grow. First things that come up every spring are the berries for me. The blackberries, the raspberries, the strawberries, the blueberries. They're the first thing to start flowering and producing in the spring, and we'll kind of watch that happen. While at the same time, we'll take a look at potatoes, and green beans, and tomatoes and peppers, and leeks, and a whole bunch of other things, grapes, and we'll look at how they grow, where they grow best, what you can do to kind of help them flourish, and we'll just kind of peek in on my garden over the course of the year, and maybe you can learn something, and maybe I can too. We're definitely going to do a podcast in the future that's going to be like all encompassing of what you might call entertainment. For me, that's going to be like movies, TV, music, things of that nature. I definitely want to do a podcast about cannabis, and I'm not talking about smoking cannabis, although that's wonderful too. That's not, and maybe we'll talk about it a little bit, but for the most part, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about cannabis as the wonder textile, for lack of a better term, and all the different things it offers in all its different forms. And we're going to look at the history of cannabis and hemp and the laws surrounding it and how they came to be, and how that's kind of changed the course of the world. And that last statement kind of leads me into the topic of another podcast that we're going to have here in the future, and that's going to be I'll use the most general term, and I'll say the environment. Now, what I mean by that is we're going to look at the environment through a different lens and through some different ideas, where we hopefully can find some common ground with even the most extreme among us on all sides, and find some common ground that could lead to maybe a more sustainable way to do what we do. And in the course of all my backpacking and hiking, I have seen environmental atrocities in places that you would not expect to see it, because people hardly ever go there. There is very few places left in this country where the arm and hand of humans haven't reached and tainted in remarkably efficient ways. I remember once I was in the south of Glacier there, the John Marshall Wilderness. I think that's what it's called. I'll have to think about that. The Bob Marshall Wilderness, the Bob Marshall Wilderness there south of Glacier National Park. And I had been walking for so long into the deep, deep woods that the trail I was on had pretty much disappeared, and it had become an adventure in bushwhacking. And that gives you some idea of how far away I was from humans, days and days of walking. And I remember I was bushwhacking through thicket, and this is grizzly bear country, so you got to do that slowly, or you're gonna bushwhack right up, a mama grizzly's ass, and that will not work out well for you. And while I'm bushwhacking through thicket in nowhere, Montana, I come upon an enormous pile of like rusted old propane tanks. I'm like, what, did somebody drop these from a helicopter? How did they get here, and why? And, so there's nary a place anymore you can go where you can't find the bad habits and bad choices of humans. You'll be near a stream or creek or river, middle of nowhere, and all of a sudden coming downstream is like a plastic bag and an empty water bottle just floating. And so I want to talk about the environment. I don't want to just rehash stuff that we've been arguing about for decades. Climate change, it exists, it doesn't exist, back and forth, depending on I want to talk about the environment through a lens that's undeniable, where no one can say, "Oh, that's not true. This isn't real." I'm going to talk to you about the environment with things I've seen with my own eyes, photographed with my own camera, things that I know are real, things that you know are real. And we're going to talk about the impact of these very real and undeniable things through the lens of sustainability and the long term outlook for humans on the planet Earth. I thought I might take a moment early in this show to tell you a bit about myself, and just because. I'm going to read you a list of everything included in this list I've made money doing at one time or another in my life for some length of time. I've been employed as a door to door salesman, a district manager for a large chain of stores, a store manager for a national electronics retail chain, a landscaper, a bounty hunter, a janitor, a soft pretzel salesman, a volunteer coordinator, a nonprofit associate, an AmeriCorps member, a car salesman, a men's apparel associate, an auto detailer, a construction worker, a waiter, a soldier, a flower salesman, a public speaker, a driver, a photomat clerk, a forklift operator, a burger flipper, a pizza maker, a gardener, a state certified pesticide applicator, a nuclear weapons specialist, a mudjacking foreman, a babysitter, a groom hostler, a house sitter, an electrician, an antiquarian's helper, a personal trainer, a cat sitter, a storyteller, a computer programmer, a leasing agent, a carpet cleaner, a satellite technology director, a security guard, a gas station attendant or gas pumper, a small business owner, a writer, a truck driver, a stadium attendant, and a filmmaker, among others. I have through hiked the Appalachian Trail. For those of you that don't or may not know what a through hike is, it's essentially, and there's some wiggle in the definition because some section hikes can become through hikes, but I don't want to get into all that. So, in the simplest possible terms, for what we're trying to get to right now, a through hike is when you start a trail at one end and walk it consecutively straight through to the other. In the case of the Appalachian Trail, it's a little less than 2,200 miles. The southern terminus of the Appalachian Trail is Springer Mountain in Georgia. And the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail is Mount Katahdin, which is in Maine. And it is in Baxter State Park, which is one of the most beautiful and unique parks in the entire country. It was created by former Maine Governor, I think his name was Percival Baxter. And Mr. Baxter left essentially a grant in perpetuity to fund Baxter State Park so it would never have to rely on outside money or funds to function. And in the course of creating Baxter State Park, he stipulated that it had to remain wild, so there's no roads, businesses in there. And Baxter State Park is a remarkable place. And up there, just as you exit out of Baxter State Park on the Appalachian Trail in Maine going southbound, you enter into the 100-mile wilderness. 100 miles of generally roadless tract through some incredibly remote and beautiful areas of Maine, just filled with ponds and streams and lakes and moose and black bear. It's just a gorgeous, wonderful walk. And there's these little warnings on the trail at both the south and north end of the 100-mile wilderness, or at least there was when I hiked through hiked the trail, that warns you about how there was nothing and no help coming for 100 miles. So go in, enter this area prepared, something to that effect. I forget exactly. You get the point. So there's a little bit about me. You may remember that in episode 1 of the podcast, the portion between the commas, we talked a great deal about the 13th Amendment and how that's kind of played out historically. And to start tonight's podcast, or today's podcast, one of the things I'd like to do is take a look at the 14th Amendment. Again, we're looking at what's been going on at the Capitol over the last week, and I'd like to frame it within the context of the 14th Amendment, since the Constitution's supposed to matter and all that. Now, the 14th Amendment, like many others, is broken down into sections. And Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, which is kind of unrelated to what we're talking about here tonight, covers natural-born citizenship. Section 1 covers primarily naturalized citizenship. Section 2 kind of lays out the apportionment for representation in the states and the requirements to hold those offices, or at least some of them. And now we're at Section 3, which is the section of the 14th Amendment that I'd like to focus on. And I'd like to start by just reading to you Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And as I'm reading it to you, kind of put it in the context of what we've been looking at the last week or two, specifically as it relates to the activities at the Capitol. 14th Amendment, Section 3. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president, or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States, or as a member of any state legislature, or as an executive or judicial officer of any state, to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. So you can't provide aid or even comfort. Can anyone deny that what happened at the Capitol was a rebellion? They openly said it. And we're going to look at some of the videos tonight from inside the Capitol, and we're going to kind of talk about them and take a look in some deeper detail at what really transpired that day.
Glad to see you guys. You guys are fucking patriots. Look at this guy. He's got covered in blood. God bless you.
Yes.
You good, sir? Do you need medical attention?
I'm good, thank you.
All right.
I got shot in the face. Where are they? I got shot in the face with some kind of plastic bullet.
Any chance I could get you guys to leave the Senate wing?
We will. I've been making sure they ain't disrespecting the place.
Okay, just want to let you guys know this is like the sacredest place.
I know. Hey.
And let's talk about the national anthem as it relates, once again, to the Capitol attacks. Over the last, say, 25 to 30 years, the places that you see the national anthem are like before sporting events or the theater, public gatherings in large numbers, generally relating entertainment events. The interesting part for me in this next video that we're going to take a look at is traditionally, what is it that the national anthem does at these sporting events, theater, public events where it's played? What's the universal truths about it? As I see it, It's generally signifies the beginning of the game. It always, right before the game starts, they do the national anthem, and then shortly after the national anthem, boom, it's play ball, regardless, or play whatever. It's time to do the thing. So it oftentimes signifies the start of the event. It's through that lens that I want to take a look a little deeper at a gaggle of idiots known as the Oath Keepers. Now, the Oath Keepers generally are former cops, military people who have taken an oath to the Constitution. You would find that their membership probably leans 95+% right wing. I don't think there's a whole lot of Oath Keepers calling themselves Democrats, although there's probably a few who would like to call themselves libertarian, but again, right leaning. And these Oath Keepers, they proclaim that they're defenders of the Constitution in relation to the oath they took to defend it. I'd like to read to you a portion from oathkeepers.org, the Oath Keepers website, and this is from the About section from their website that I'm going to read from. Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current and formerly serving military, police, and first responders who pledge to fulfill the oath all military and police take to, quote, defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, end quote. That oath, mandated by Article 6 of the Constitution itself, is to the Constitution, not to the politicians, and Oath Keepers declare that they will not obey unconstitutional orders, such as to disarm the American people, to conduct warrantless searches, or to detain Americans as enemy combatants in violation of their ancient right to jury trial. Oath Keepers reaches out, and I think this is important to note this language, reaches out. Oath Keepers reaches out to both current serving and veterans to remind them of their oaths, to teach them more about the Constitution they swore to defend, and to inspire them to defend it. See below for details on how we do that. Our motto is not on our watch. First responders include firefighters, search and rescue, EMTs, disaster relief, and similar emergency personnel. While not all such personnel take an oath to the Constitution, many do, and all are a critical audience for our mission. So that's the Oath Keepers. A little bit about them anyway. These are trained cops and military. Let's talk about where they come from and who they are. These guys are definitely a paramilitary group, the Oath Keepers, that they've incited and promoted civil war, built on lies, and not even like questionable lies, but like just obviously and undeniably horseshit. They built the foundation of their belief system on a pile of horseshit. But they undeniably have been promoting civil war and pushing for this, something just like what happened on January 6th in the riots or the attack or whatever you want to call it. So getting back to the national anthem, next we're going to take a look at a video that shows the Oath Keepers kind of arriving at the Capitol attacks in unison or in conjunction with the crowd singing the national anthem. And I would argue that that was a form of communication. Singing of the national anthem, which, you know, is easy enough to get people to start doing at any point, particularly in a crowd like that. So it would have been easy for them to have to instigate the singing of the national anthem and have that signify the start of the attacks, just like at a sporting event or theater, it signifies the starting of the event. This singing of the national anthem in this video is going to show the arrival of a paramilitary unit arriving on the scene of an attempted overthrow of their government. and you're going to see them moving in platoon size. Their arrival is signifying the beginning of these events, and that's what the singing of the national anthem is to communicate. And you can see that several of them have earpieces in or communicating with each other, and probably with oath keepers spread all throughout the crowd, because the oath keepers, kind of Grand Poobah leadership were on the ground as well that day. So in the video, you see them march up here to the singing of the national anthem. In this next video, you'll get to see from a different angle as the same line of oath keepers arrive at the doors of the Capitol after the national anthem. And these are all just a mere moments between these two videos were made. These right-wing oath keepers show up, the national anthem plays to signify the beginning of the event. And we all know what that event was. And these guys were much more the insiders than anything else. But these are tactically trained men performing under a planned attack. This wasn't just protesters showing up with something to say and waving a flag. They trained for this. They prepared for this, and they knew what this was.
Now you want to put all those names down, and we start hunting them down one by one.
Traitors get guillotined.
We are at war. Right on. We stay forward and kill one of us. And no matter what, even if it kills you, remain a free man. Die on your feet.
Take it easy and away.
Showed up!
Where's the rest of everybody? There's not enough of us. They're going to bring vets in or something.
Is this the city?
Where the fuck are they? Where are they?
While we're here, we might as well set up a government.
Hey, let's take a seat, people! Let's take a seat!
Hey, Nancy Pelosi.
Let's vote on some shit!
Where the fuck is Nancy?
We paid for it. This is our house.
No, this is our chair.
I agree with you, brother, but it's not ours. It belongs to the Vice President of the United States when he's in here. It's not our chair. Look, I love you guys, you're brothers, but we can't be disrespectful.
Don't disrespect.
They can steal an election, we can't sit in their chair.
No, we're not putting up with that either. It's just, look, it's a PR war, okay? You have to understand it's an IO war. We can't lose the IO war.
We're better than that.
Okay? Information operation. We can't do it.
I want to tell me, just get a snap of that.
Yeah, I took a picture.
And people inside that building helped them. People inside that building, elected officials, Capitol Police, people inside that building helped them, or at the very least, did nothing to hinder them. Because these people, you know, that blue line, man, that blue line that just says a cop can do no wrong. And the two cops that we're going to talk about next from Virginia, one of which was a trained sniper, they were given access to the Capitol during the attacks by producing their badge and suggesting that they were there to help, and then got inside and started not helping. When it relates to this Capitol attack, we're happy again to round up, you know, Bubba and his pack of idiots. What I don't get is, yet again, all the insiders, you know, why are they getting this free pass? Division in the way the justice system treats people based on their money, power, skin color, any number of factors. Poor people, people of color, we break laws. Rich people, people in power, they violate policies and procedures. Now, when you talk about these attacks at the Capitol, or whatever you want to call what happened at the Capitol, the people who perpetrated those acts, the individuals and the groups they are related to, those people who perpetrated these attacks, we know that there's people that they dislike and want rid of from this government. And that was part of the reason for this attack. Some of those people, plain as day, Nancy Pelosi is someone that the people who perpetrated this attack do not like. One of the people they wanted to remove, Chuck Schumer, most definitely falls into that category, I think. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, absolutely falls into the category of people that the perpetrators of this attack on the Capitol do not like. And the squad, which includes Ayanna Pressley. I'd like to take a moment and talk about Ayanna Pressley as it relates to these Capitol attacks. As a member of the squad, she is high on the list of people that the perpetrators of this attack do not like, along with Pelosi and Schumer and several others. And on this day, even maybe Mike Pence on the day of the attacks upon the Capitol. So these are the people that they would have wanted to remove. Now, Sarah Grow is the chief of staff for Ayanna Pressley. Here's a tweet from Sarah Grow regarding the attacks. I had gas mask in my hand, barricaded the doors to our office with furniture, and tried to throw our panic buttons within a few minutes. So Sarah Grow and Ayanna Pressley were barricaded in their office, and they wanted to press the panic button to ask for help. And here's what Miss Grow had to say about that. And I quote, "Every panic button in my office had been torn out, the whole unit," she told the newspaper, adding that the team could come up with no rationale as to why. The staffer said that she had used them before and they had not switched offices since then. She explained that because of multiple death threats aimed at Presley over the past 2 years, it had become routine for her staffers to run through safety drills. Presley, as one of 4 progressive Democratic representatives in the squad, has faced racist attacks from Trump supporters. In preparation for this podcast, I had been looking for an answer as to how this came to be and who might have done this. And I haven't found anything that provided any clarity. And any kind of work like that, maintenance work like that, then done in a public building, there's a paper trail. Who came to fix it? Who paid for it? How? A billing. This should not be a question. And furthermore, aren't there cameras everywhere? This shouldn't be a secret. Who took these out? When we go to the next question, we don't even have to wonder about the answer, because if in any way they were taken out, with even an inkling of nefariosity, then you have to presume that those people knew what they were doing and were doing it as part of a larger plot. This was not some random series of, disconnected events that all just kind of happened to work together. Bullshit. We need to find out who did this. Ayanna Presley would be one of the people that the folks who perpetrated this attack would most like to hurt in some way, whether that be politically, physically, or otherwise. And I don't think there's any question about that. And because of that, we need to find out who removed the panic button from Ayanna Presley's office, putting her, Ayanna Presley and Sarah Grow and whoever else may have been there and in tremendous danger. And keep in mind that I'm not sure that they even know when it was taken out. So there was a period of time that, aside from this riot, where any other number of things could have happened, requiring any people in that office to need a panic button, and it wasn't there, and they believed it was. That is really dangerous, and that is like top shelf scheming there, scheming with like death and like governmental overthrow as the end that's being sought. How fucked up is that? Now, the timing of this, you have to admit, is pretty unique, and at least might not be an accident. Who are committing crimes that historically have ended up with people hanging. Look at Mary Surratt and all the people relating to the Lincoln assassination. You might say, well, that was an attempt to assassinate the president, or a successful attempt to murder the president, assassinate the president. And to that, I would say that yes, it was, but with the idea being that they would then take over the government, which they did. And we talked about in episode 1, when they, instead of Lincoln designing Reconstruction post-Civil War, it was going to be done by Andrew Johnson, Tennessee racist, which is why we still have these kind of ridiculous problems that we have today of people storming the Capitol, these racist knuckleheads storming the Capitol. We still have these problems because of that. And it was an attempt to overthrow the government. I mean, the assassination of Lincoln was to seize power of the government. And that's what these people were trying to do, not necessarily through assassination. Although, what do you think would have happened if they would have found Nancy Pelosi? One of these knuckleheads, what do you think would have happened? The fact that they were knuckleheads and they failed at this doesn't in any way lessen what they did or what they were attempting to do. And that was to overthrow the government. There's a lot of rich white folks and politicians and capital, and police and military people inside that made this happen that should be sitting in a jail cell without bail. And looking, historically speaking, they provided aid and comfort to people who tried to overthrow the government. And historically, that has been a crime for the gallows, as harsh as that sounds. And I'm not suggesting we do that. I'm suggesting that historically has been how we have responded. You can just ask Mary Surratt. While I'm not sure that we should go that far, we need to kind of display that we understand how serious this is. And a real good way to do that would be to lock up all these insiders, these rich white people who are so comfortable doing this shit because they know they're going to get away with it. Just like the cops, when they murder people in the streets, they're comfortable doing that because they know they're going to get away with it. And the same thing with Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani and Alex Jones, these crowd inciting knuckleheads, all three of them, at most. I mean, Mary Surratt didn't kill Lincoln. She was nowhere near him at the time. She, at most, provided aid and comfort to those who did. And much like Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, Alex Jones, that Boebert nut job, all of these people who law enforcement doesn't seem all that inclined to arrest, but they're happy to go get the Viking knucklehead. You know, poor folks will round you up in a matter of days. But these politicians, these rich white people who make all the rules, somehow continue to tap dance to the raindrops of responsibility, as always. And again, and I think this is an important point to stress, we let them. They know they're going to get away with it. So they just keep doing these ridiculous, horrible, awful, inciting things because who's going to stop them? And they're all, you know, buddies. The only people who would stop them is law enforcement, and law enforcement are the people, you know, perpetrating these frauds. And it's all built, again, on this foundation of just horseshit and lies. The idea being, you know, it doesn't have to be true. Just say it often, say it loud, and don't deviate from the lie. It's you know, kind of the Edward Bernays, Gable's Playbook 101 of like propaganda and horseshit. The bigger the lie, the easier, the more people will believe it, I think is another one of the staples of propaganda. Too many of us have eaten up the horseshit of these idiots, like these oath keepers. And we're going to take a look at this video as well that shows the attackers inside the Capitol.
There's gotta be something in here we can use against these scumbags. Someone's talking about butterflies. This is crazy. Who's a good one? Him and Lawler or whatever. Holly.
Cruz, I think Cruz would want us to do this, so
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we're good.
Glad to see you guys. You guys are fucking patriots. Look at this guy. He's got covered in blood. God bless you.
There's a lot of control. We love you guys. We love the cops.
It's only a matter of time. Justice is coming.
Start hunting them down one by one.
Traitors get guillotined!
We are at war. Right on. We stay forward and kill one of us. And no matter what, even if it kills you, remain a free man. Die on your feet.
Even though the results clearly show that they were incited, people in these leadership positions, Trump, Giuliani, and Alex Jones just whipping the crowd into a frenzy and then leading them down the street with a bullhorn. Josh Hawley giving them their little half Nazi salute. None of these things are an accident, and none of these things are new. And we talked in episode 1 a great deal about the KKK and white supremacists having infiltrated law enforcement, the military. We specifically talked about that in episode 1 of Eat, Fuck, Kill back in June. And here we are 6 months later in episode 2, and they'll come much quicker now. And here's white supremacists having infiltrated the military and the police, attacking the Capitol and trying to overthrow the government. And because many of their buddies are either in the military, still active police, or in positions of power in the government, many of them will be let off the hook for this. And that's yet another failing of the institutions of our democracy. You know, it's almost like a portion of the country was, oh, it's just boys being boys. You fucking out of your mind? This is fucking an attempt to overthrow the most powerful institutions in the history of humankind. You think the United States government ain't shit? If nothing else, they got the power to blow up this planet and everyone on it 150 million fucking times over. And power like that in the hands of knuckleheads, like unchecked knuckleheads. I mean, because it's been in the hands of knuckleheads for a long time, but at least they've had checks to some degree, ever dwindling checks, but checks nonetheless. So let's talk about 2 of the police officers who have already been arrested for the attack on the Capitol. These 2 police officers were with the Rocky Mount Police Department out of Virginia. These cops were part of the attempt to overthrow the government. One of the officers with the Rocky Mount Police Department was Thomas Robertson, and the other was a guy named Jacob Fracker. Mr. Fracker is a corporal in the Virginia National Guard. So he's an active duty military in the Guard. He's active. He's a cop, and he's an infantryman. So these are the kind of people who showed up to overthrow the government. Oath keepers, police officers, and one and the same but separate in this case, because Fracker and Robertson are not oath keepers, or at least that has not been in any way proven or shown to be the case to date. So they're just additional cops on top of all the oath keepers. Why would this surprise anyone? Abuses by the justice system of all different types. The prison system has become just this cruel and completely unbeneficial to the public institution. Why would we as the people fund a prison system that isn't accomplishing any of the goals that we the people would want from our prison system? Instead of, I mean, I acknowledge that there are some prisoners who may not be redeemable. I don't want to make that argument, but I acknowledge that possibility exists. But I think it's just as important to acknowledge that many people that go to prison go there for nonviolent things, drugs, and oftentimes for absolute bullshit, from trumped up charges, from trumped up assholes. And these people are thrown into an environment that immediately begins to destroy them. And we know that. We've seen it for years. Comedians and movies have joked for decades about, the raping that goes on in prisons, like it's, funny. And the violence, the gratuitous, ubiquitous violence, and then all the corruption, the guards who, there's a lot of guards in the prison system who get their jollies off torturing people in their charge, prisoners in their charge. And it's, this is the system that we've decided can best help the public. So we take people who have at worst, fucked around with drugs some, and now we're going to throw them into a system that's going to rape them and violently beat the shit out of them with great regularity, degrade them, dehumanize them, and destroy their spirit. And we're going to do this for years and years and years because they use this, these drugs. And then we're going to release them and expect them to be just jolly and fine. when in fact the system itself destroyed them. And we do this over and over and over. And then, of course, these destroyed people with no money are released back into the public. And there's, assholes like those 2 Rocky Mount police officers that tried to overthrow the Capitol, waiting for them on every street corner to roust them and stick them back in the system for round 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. Keep spinning the wheels of injustice. I'd like to take this opportunity to talk for a moment about a woman named Jenna Ryan, who is a real estate agent from the state of Texas, who flew by private plane to the attack on the Capitol. After being arrested for her dumbassery, Miss Ryan had this to say to her local propaganda spouter, quote, "I feel like I was basically following my president. I was following what we were called to do. He asked us to fly there. He asked us to be there. So I was doing what he asked us to do." Now, that's a really important quote because it shows that these knuckleheads from all over the country, these oath keepers, these cops, these military, these militia, wannabes, and these idiots, no, let me take that back. I don't want to call them idiots. These completely propagandized and suffering from tremendous cognitive dissonance. These people flew, drove, and whatever else from all over the country to attack the Capitol at what they believed was the president's behest. These are crimes of great significance historically in our country. And I guess in the name of letting the rich, the powerful, and the white get away with fucking anything, we're going to look the other way at these crimes against the very institutions of our government. Institutions that these oath keepers would suggest were important to them. And I'll point this out again. Will not obey unconstitutional orders, such as orders to disarm the American people or to conduct warrantless searches. In that case, of course, they're talking about the Second and the Fourth Amendment. Now, the Fourth Amendment is clear as hell. And these oath keepers, these cops, I mean, who do they think is doing all these ridiculous, unwarranted, and without reasonable, articulable suspicion, these searches where people are just searched because a cop needs to fill his quota for that day, and they're on video all over the place. And it's oath keepers, it's cops that are doing those warrantless searches, those or lying to judges to get warrants that they should never get. That's, see these oath keepers out of one side of their mouth say, we're not going to break our pledge to the Constitution, and then immediately break their pledge to the Constitution out of the other side of their mouth. Just like the protesters who out of one side of their mouth say, Blue Lives Matter, we love the cops. And out of the other side of their mouths, they fucking murdered them. Because it doesn't have to be true. They just have to say it often and say it loud.
A family says a Hamilton County deputy strip searched a teenager and groped 5 others. Now they're filing a lawsuit. I'm Josh Rowe.
And I'm Latricia Thomas. The suit claims the teens were forced to stand in the cold rain for hours and were berated by the deputies as well.
And as Kylie Thomas shows us, this is not the first time they have been named in a lawsuit. Kylie.
That's right. This is the 3rd lawsuit where Hamilton County deputies are accused of illegally pulling people over for tinted windows. 2 claim that they ended in strip searches and the other an alleged baptism. Now, one local attorney is looking to file a class action lawsuit against the county. An April traffic stop for possible tinted windows in Sale Creek ignites another lawsuit against Hamilton County.
There was no cause to stop the vehicle. It went wrong right from there.
Angel Johnson says Deputy Daniel Wilkie inappropriately searched her 14-year-old daughter along the side of the road, plus 4 other 14-year-old girls. A new lawsuit says Wilkie squeezed their breasts, butt, and private area. Johnson's daughter says Wilkie reached under her bra through her shirt and felt her breasts. The lawsuit claims Wilkie told the 16-year-old boy to take off his pants, while Deputy Jacob Goforth ordered him to take off his boxers too along the side of the road.
Mr. Wilkie believes that he can search anybody in any manner, in any way, and that's what this young lady is imparting.
This isn't the only lawsuit Wilkie and Goforth are facing that started with claims of tinted windows. A woman says Wilkie and Goforth stopped her for false claims of a window tint violation back in February. The lawsuit says the encounter resulted in Wilkie stripping down to his underwear and baptizing her in Saudi Lake. That was his alternative instead of taking her to jail for marijuana. Then there's a third lawsuit against Wilkie that again started because of tinted windows. This time, Wilkie is accused of excessive force. You may remember James Mitchell was pulled over in July. As you can see in this dash cam footage, Wilkie strip searched Mitchell on the side of the road.
It's a pattern with this particular deputy and his sidekick.
All 3 incidents happened within 5 months of each other. Flores believes the county is cultivating a dangerous culture with no real consequences. Now, the sheriff's office says Wilkie is suspended with pay right now, and the other deputy involved is on paid administrative leave tonight. Now, we did also reach out to the county attorney to get a statement on this lawsuit that they're named on, but we have not heard back yet tonight. Live downtown, I'm Kylie Thomas.
Like when they used to talk that shit for years about Colin Kaepernick and how Kaepernick's was insulting the military and the police by kneeling during the national anthem, and how he was insulting the flag. And no matter how many times they were told that's not at all what this was about, they kept saying that same stupid shit, because it doesn't have to be true. You just have to say it often and say it loud. And enough dumbasses and enough highly propagandized, ignorant people will glom onto it, no matter how ridiculous your message. If you say it often and you say it loud enough, there's a highly propagandized person out there ready to hop onto every word of it, as sad as that may be. Edward Bernays, you must be so proud. Edward Bernays, you must be just gleaming with pride. Now, Miss Ryan, on January 5th, she posted on social media showing herself taking her private jet to Washington, D.C. This is the day before the attacks on the 5th of January. Miss Ryan posted photos all over her social media showing herself getting in her private jet to whisk off to the Nazi rally in D.C. Here's some more information. Here's some more verbal diarrhea. Here's some more propagandized speech from Jenna Ryan, the real estate agent from Texas. Here's a quote from Ms. Ryan. "I just want people to know I'm a normal person," Ryan said, "that I listened to my president who told me to go to the Capitol, that I was displaying my patriotism while I was there, and I was just protesting, and I wasn't trying to do anything violent, and I didn't realize there was actually violence." And it's funny that she says that, because on her social media, posted a photo of her posing in front of the smashed out windows at the Capitol while she stands there putting up a peace sign, which is just, remember, because she didn't know there was any violence, and she would never, but yet there she is posing for a picture inside the smashed out window of the Capitol, which people have clearly climbed in through and destroyed the room inside. And when she posted this video, this photograph of her standing in front of the busted out window, she put a caption under the photo that says, "Window at the Capitol. And if the news doesn't stop lying about us, we're coming after their studios next." So Not only did she know she was there for violence, she knew what she was doing. She knew what the people around her were doing. And now, like the playbook says, they'll say anything to try to get away with it. And it doesn't have to be true. They just have to say it often and say it loud. You know why? Because they expect that their president, who incited this attempt to take over the government, is going to give them all a free pass and give them pardons, which he's probably doing today on the 19th of January as I talk to you. He is probably today, if not right now, giving pardons to these terrorists, these domestic terrorists who tried to overthrow the government. And because they did it on behalf of this criminal, that criminal will then let these other criminals off. And the rest of us will stand around impotent with nothing we can do. Verbal worthlessness from Miss Jenna Ryan. I think we all deserve a pardon. I'm facing a prison sentence. I think I do not deserve that. And from what I understand, every person is going to be arrested that was there. So I think everyone deserves a pardon. So I would ask the President of the United States to give me a pardon. You must be kidding me. You must be kidding me. They're so ignorant to the, or maybe they just want us to think they're ignorant to the depth of what they tried to pull off here. And again, you know, private jets, so it's more of the suffering Trump voter, the real strugglers in our communities. I've actually met Donald Trump, and I might have met him twice, or yeah, I met him, but I once for certain. And I'm going to tell you a little story about the time I met Donald Trump. And some of the, you know, the time frames may be off by a year or two, because this is a very, very long time ago. I was born, and for the first 17 years of my life, I lived in and around a large mid-Atlantic city. And Donald Trump, as you know, and this would have been during the 1970s and 1980s. And during that time, Donald Trump was slowly beginning to build to prominence in both New York and Atlantic City, New Jersey. And I come from a very poor family. So as early as about 8 or 9 years old, I had pretty regular jobs. And I'm not talking about like chores around the house. I'm talking about actual jobs. And some of the jobs I took, I would stand on, and this would have been in the late 70s, this part of it, I would stand on the on-ramps to highways and sell flowers. And on certain holidays, Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, as like an 8 and 9-year-old kid, I could make several $100s in a single day in the early 1970s, selling bouquets of roses and carnations and other flowers to commuters. And when I wasn't selling flowers, I also sold soft pretzels. I would set up at prime locations with a food cart that was filled with hot soft pretzels, and I would sell them back in the same time frame, late 70s, early 80s, 25 cents each, 5 for a buck. And as I got a little older, I took on a third job because my 2 other jobs were generally weekend jobs, and they at times could be sporadic. You know, on cold days, rainy days, they're not going to put a kid out on the street corner to sell pretzels or flowers. I took on a paper route, and I would have been, by the time I took on the paper route, I was probably 10, maybe even 11, but I think about 10. So by the time I took my paper route, it was about 1981-ish, 1980 to 1982-ish, somewhere in that range, maybe even 79 to 82, when I took on the paper route. And it was a large paper, very important paper of the time, and it covered the entire region, and which most definitely included, we'll say, the Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey kind of area. This newspaper did. And starting in about, like I said, between like 1979 and 1981-ish, I began to deliver this newspaper every day. And I rode out on my bike, and I rode up and down the streets, and I delivered the newspaper. And what began to draw me into the newspaper then, this is way before the internet and all that stuff, or ESPN or any of that stuff. So as like a kid, as a baseball fan, as a little kid, I used to collect baseball cards, and I was a big baseball fan, played it regularly. And so your only alternative as a baseball fan in 1979, if you wanted to know what was going on in the world of baseball, was to turn to the newspaper. And it still wasn't a perfect setup, because even in the newspaper on these East Coast newspapers, they wouldn't have any information about baseball that happened on the West Coast the night before, because it happened too late for them to get it in their edition. So anyway, that's how I began as a 10-year-old kid. I started to read the newspaper every day. I was driven there by baseball box scores as about a 10-year-old kid in the late 70s, early 80s. So as a kid of the late 70s, in the late 70s, early 80s, I began reading the newspaper every day, driven there initially by baseball box scores and information on what was going on in the world of baseball. And ultimately, I guess it just became habit, and I just started, and plus you're wrapping these papers up, putting a rubber band around them, bagging them on the days it rains. So you can't help but kind of absorb what's on the paper while you're doing all that. And in the late 70s and early 80s, Donald Trump and Donald Trump's face was somewhere in that newspaper with great regularity. So by the early 1980s, as like a 10-year-old kid, late 70s, early 80s, I was already aware of Donald Trump as he began to ascend. And many of the newspapers, so as I'm beginning to kind of, as a 10-year-old kid, read the newspaper every day, I began to read about Donald Trump. And many of the stories about Donald Trump were about, back in those days anyway, before he was, not near as wealthy as he is now. A lot of the news reports, as Trump kind of ascended the hierarchy in Atlantic City and the moneyed elites, they were about his shady dealings in his casino operations. So day after day, as like a young kid, I'm reading about all these shady things that Donald Trump is doing in Atlantic City to, like rig votes, and that he, and a lot of these newspaper articles back then would speculate about, he had ties to the mob and, and things like that. And so at a pretty early age, I knew Donald Trump was a really shady dude who was doing shady things. And there was lots of reports as well about racist shit. Like he used to throw out tenants for under racist premises, among a number of other things. And this is the kind of stuff I was reading about Donald Trump in the early 1980s as he ascended in Atlantic City. Around the same time, as a young boy, not only was I a baseball fan, but I was also a fan of what was known at the time as WWF Wrestling, World Wrestling Federation. Jimmy Superfly Snuka, Andre the Giant, Bob Backlund was a champion at the time. I used to love the WWF, and I watched it on TV regularly. And on a couple of different occasions, I would go see live events. Occasionally, I would see them in bigger venues in the larger cities, New York, Baltimore, Philly. And on this occasion, on several occasions, I would go, my dad would take me to see wrestling WWF cards at either the Wildwood or the Atlantic City Convention Centers. And on one occasion, I don't know the exact year, it was the early 80s, I'll say somewhere between like 83, 84, and like, I don't know, 87, 88. And I know that's a big range, but that's still a long ways back. And my dad's not around anymore, so I can't ask him for a reference point. And I've kind of looked it up on the internet to see if I could pinpoint which venue on which day it is, but I was a young kid and I don't know. But the facts remain. While I don't know the date and the exact location, although if I had to say, I would guess that it was the Wildwood Convention Center and not the Atlantic City, but I'm not certain. But anyway, I was at a WWF event, and I was excited. There was, and they used to bring to these events back in the late 70s and early 80s, before and after they would bring like wrestlers and their managers and stuff. They would stand out in like the entryway of the convention center and like shake hands with fans and stuff. And so I was going around, I was meeting like Captain Lou Albano. I don't know if these were all at the same one, but or if I'm like combining memories of the people that were there. But I remember Andre the Giant, Big John Studd, Special Delivery Jones, Jimmy Snuka, Superfly. And as I'm going around in the lobby, and my dad's right there with me the whole time, and my dad is a big dude. My dad was 6'3", 285, 295, big dude. And we're walking around in the lobby, and I'm so excited. I'm running around meeting all these wrestlers, and I come across this guy that I know is familiar to me, but I can't place it. I'm trying to figure out if he's like a manager for wrestlers or what the case is, but I'm looking at him, because everyone else I recognize, I'm like, oh, that's Lou Albano, that's this person, that's that person, and I knew who everyone was because I was a big fan. I was a kid, and but here's this face, and it's familiar to me, but I can't place it. And I don't know, I'm somewhere between like 11 and 14 years old. This familiar face is a little younger. He's wearing a suit and a tie, younger face. And at first, I'm going through like the catalog in my head. I'm going through trying to determine if he's a wrestling manager, maybe he's an announcer. And I couldn't place his face, but I knew that I knew it. And then, so I went up to him. I was just a kid and I didn't care. So I went up to him and I kind of asked him, I'm like, are you a manager for the wrestlers? And he said, no. And he explained to me kind of briefly and dismissively, but still explained that he was an investor, and I didn't know what the fuck that was, or not truly, that he was an investor in wrestling, and that he was going to own the building, that one day he would own the building that we were standing in, which was either the Atlantic City or the Wildwood Convention Center, or maybe he said he already did, I don't know, but he talked about owning the building, the venue. And then I said, and then it kind of came to me, and I still wasn't clear, but it would like the picture was crystallizing in my head in the moment that he introduced himself, and he said, my name's Donald Trump. And he reached his hand out to shake my hand, and he took his other hand and he kind of put it on my head and shook my hair, or, you know, that little thing they do to men just to boys. When he introduced himself as Donald Trump, you know, I'm an ignorant kid. So immediately, like all these stories that I had read in the newspaper while delivering the newspaper for years in the mornings were running through my head, that, oh, he hated black people, and he was running with the mob and all this stuff. And that he was like, had corrupt land deals to, you know, build casinos, and was avoiding paying taxes, and just all these stories that I had read in the newspaper that I delivered every day. And like an ignorant kid and like a dumbass, I asked him about one of the stories that I had read about him. And he didn't like that very much. And I don't remember the nature of the question I asked him, but he did not like the question I asked him. And it was innocent enough. I was a kid. It's not like, and it was a different time. It's not like there were cameras all around. So he kind of dismissed me with the back of his hand, and he said, move along, kid. And he kind of pushed me. And not like violently. I don't want you to misunderstand, but he pushed me hard enough that I moved away from him. And then he turned his body and started to walk away. And my dad was pissed. My dad was pissed, and my dad was huge. And my dad walked up behind Donald Trump, and my dad put his left hand on Donald Trump's right shoulder and like made him turn around and apologize to me for pushing me. And Donald Trump, for like a half a second, tried to play like tough guy dismissive with my dad. But then like it didn't take but like a brief second thought, and he's like, I'm not doing this. And he apologized to me for shoving me. And that would have been in either the Atlantic City or Wildwood, New Jersey Convention Center. between like 1981 and 1984-ish, maybe 1985. So I don't know exactly when. So that's like my experience with Donald Trump. Like my dad was ready to beat the shit out of him for pushing me in like a lobby of one of the convention center in New Jersey at a WWF event in the, I'll call it early 80s. I wanted to touch base briefly again on something that we talked at length about, that I talked at length about during episode 1 of Eat, Fuck, Kill. That was the portion between the comments. And what we talked about, or what I talked about for an extended period of time, were grand juries and how district attorneys, prosecutors, and attorney generals had turned to the anonymity and secretiveness of grand juries as a method of allowing police officers to continually get away with the murders of American citizens, United States citizens. And episode 1 was recorded in June, well before the results of the grand jury in the Breonna Taylor case down in Kentucky. And I was more talking about grand juries based on the hundreds of times they had done this before. But then just a short while in October, just about 2 months after I recorded episode 1 and talked at length about grand juries and how they've kind of been corrupted by district attorneys, prosecutors, attorney generals. The Attorney General of Kentucky, Daniel Cameron, called a grand jury in Breonna Taylor murder. And after the grand jury came back with findings that let most of the police officers off except a slap in the wrist for one of them. Now keep in mind, grand juries, like we talked about in the first one, are supposed to be entirely secretive. But in this case, the grand jury, specific grand jurors, they came out with their attorneys to publicly state that much of what the Attorney General of Kentucky, Daniel Cameron, was stating about the results of the grand jury was not true. And because of secret proceedings, these jurors put their neck out by doing this, one, and two, it shows that, again, because of the secrecy within these grand juries, that prosecutors, district attorneys, attorney generals know that they can go in there and do and say whatever they want. And because of the secretive nature, they can get away with it. Until this point, this is a very rare occurrence where grand jurors come out and say that the proceedings were rigged. But 2 different grand jurors came out. And one of the anonymous jurors, who was known as grand juror number 1, came out with his attorney, Kevin Glogauer, and on October 20th, and said that the grand jury not only disagreed that certain actions taken by police that night were justified, but that it was never given the opportunity to indict any officer for homicide. And then a couple days after that, a second juror came out, also represented by Kevin Glogauer, confirmed that the group was limited in what charges that they were allowed to consider in this case. Quote, the grand jury was only allowed to consider the 3 wanton endangerment charges against Detective Hankinson. No opportunity to consider anything else was permitted. Anonymous grand juror number 2 agrees wholeheartedly with the statement released on behalf of anonymous grand juror number 1 and is looking forward to continuing to help set the record straight. So he called this grand jury for the sole purpose of just letting these cops get away with the murder, and never even really presented it as an option. And simply, the only thing that was presented were these wanton endangerment charges for shooting at some white people accidentally through the wall, which is just so ironic, or not ironic. It's just so sad, So he rigs the grand jury like they've done so many times, like they did against John Crawford so many times. They rig the grand jury, and then they come out and they'll say, well, we gave the facts to the grand jury and they just wouldn't indict them. So there's nothing we can do. My hands are tied. The justice system has spoken. No, you corrupted the grand jury system, rigged the results, and then pretended to play victim to those results. You rigged it. You rigged the system, Mr. Cameron. You intentionally and wantonly assisted these murderers and then lied about it. Because why wouldn't you? Who's going to stop you? Law enforcement? Politicians? Who's going to stop you, Daniel Cameron, from being an accessory to murder and forcing grand jurors to come out anonymously to show that your secret proceedings were really a sham? But it's not specific to you, Attorney General Cameron. District attorneys, prosecutors, and attorney generals all over this country have been using the rigged grand jury system to allow cops to murder anybody they want and then in secret let them get away with it. And then all the fault lies at the hands of this anonymous grand jury who were told whatever the prosecutor wanted to tell them, and that's all the information they get. And they can only consider this one charge, and it's a rigged system. It's now the vehicle by which, it's a vehicle of choice for prosecutors of all types to use to allow cops to continue to murder the people of the United States. And I thought it was just ironic that right after not a couple months after I had talked about how rigged and bullshit the grand jury system truly is, that's such a shining example of how shitty it is and how secretive and corrupt it is, came out to the whole country. And it was a useful example of what I was talking about in episode 1. And all the district attorneys and prosecutors and attorney generals that have used the grand jury system to aid and comfort murderers of United States citizens, they should all go to jail too. And not for weeks or months, but long, long times. And I bet you then they'll be all in support of there not being any more rape and violence in prisons when it's their asshole at stake. But, for years and years, when we've all known that our prison system and our entire justice system was just completely fucked up, nobody could do anything about it. If anything, we privatized it so we could turn it into a profit-driven endeavor. Let's turn rape and murder into profit for rich old white men. Pathetic.
I hope you're fucking happy and sad, you fucking little piss pants pieces of shit. Oh, we're gonna storm the Capitol. Let's storm the Capitol. We're patriots. You're a fucking coward. Patriots. Jesus Christ. Fucking idiots that I played high school football with wearing a goddamn American flag bandana talking about we gotta get up there and storm. We gotta take our country back. From what? From fucking what? What are you so goddamn upset about? What has anyone ever done to you? You fucking entitled piece of shit. Don't you ever fucking call me one again. Don't you ever say, Corey, you fucking snowflake. You're a liberal. That means that y'all what? Want some people to not be sick every now and then? Is this the thing that you can't fucking stand? So you've got to get in your goddamn fucking piece of shit Ford F-150 you got from your dad, drive it to D.C. and pitch a fucking fit? Is that what it is? Is it health care? Is it still with the fucking guns? Is that what is it? You said Obama was taking them. 8 fucking years ago you said that. Nothing. What is it that this country hasn't fucking given you? You literally got escorted out of the Capitol building aside from the ones that they had to fucking shoot. Is that what it takes? Did you just want to be a fucking martyr? God, you're so fucking pathetic. Do you not ever just sit there and think, my kids are going to see this. My grandkids are going to see this. They're going to put it in the textbook, and you're going to look like the dumbest motherfucker in the world. Nobody will give a shit about Watergate. Nobody. That is fucking... Dude, I'm out of breath from how stupid y'all are. What is it that this country doesn't give you that you think you have to do some bullshit like this? But when you see a fucking black person actually get shot... No gun in their hands, nothing. Oh, they should just comply. Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you. What is your goddamn problem? Just quit embarrassing me, man. I want my fucking country back. How about that? God damn it. Fuck y'all, you fucking cowards.
Hold the head down.
Yeah.
Please don't kill me. Please don't kill me. I'm sorry.
You guys can sit back. This paint complaints on.
Sit back.
I'm sick. Hey, I'm sick of back. You bitch pig. I can talk. I can talk about. I step up and try. Okay, come here. Come here. Stop the excessive police. This is the excessive force. You ain't seen excessive force. You follow.
Western.
Here's a limerick that I hope will stick. Sing it to all those motherfuckers like to suck to dick.
Officer friendly, gonna kill you motherfucking ass dead. A taser, a boot, a bullet to your motherfucking head. The gang all joins in, a murder but no goddamn sin. Believe your eyes, or what you are fed. With me now, officer friendly, gonna kill you motherfucking ass dead. A taser, a boot, a bullet to your motherfucking head. The gang all joins in, a murder but no goddamn sin.